The Byte Show is listener-supported at thebyteshow.com.
Hello, everybody. This is GeorgeAnn Hughes, and this is The Byte Show. And we have Joseph Farrell with us, and as everybody knows, Joseph is a graduate of Oxford University and very bright, brilliant person. And in the audio file that we did earlier with your friend, Scott, I had mentioned news stories.
Right.
I've noticed a lot of misspelled words.
Yes.
Mispunctuated sentences.
Yes.
Like there. T-H-E-R-E being used when it should be T-H-E-I-R.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And some time ago, there was an article that stated that news agencies are outsourcing their news.
Yes.
My goodness. The outsourcing just never ends.
Well, no, it doesn't. But I think, I get a lot of criticism sometimes, even for my own books, because of the typos and so on and so forth. And the problem is that churning out the amount of stuff that I churn out in a year, it's very, very easy for your brain. You're thinking, you gave the illustration of there and there. Well, it's very easy for the brain to short circuit and type one word when you're thinking another.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had that happen to me, and more often than not. And anybody who writes knows what I'm talking about. It's a very common phenomenon. But the problem is that we, in our reliance upon technology, we have allowed spell checkers, to do all this work for us. And in fact, they don't catch everything, and they certainly are not good or apt to catch grammatical errors rather than spelling errors or typographical errors, what have you.
Right.
But the deeper problem is I think, and I think this is probably what you're getting at, is that if we keep graduating people from a failing and failed. Let's be honest, folks, and admit what this is. This is a failed education system.
Yes.
That's not to say that there are not good teachers like my friend out there and many others. I talk to many of them all the time. I get emails from them all the time.
Yes.
And they're just beside themselves. Well, the problem is, friends, and that's kind of the reason I wanted my friend on.
Yeah.
Because he and I, came to the conclusion a long time ago that this system is not fixable. It is not fixable. Throwing more money at it and tinkering with the basic principles that are already there, it's the basic principles that have led to this mess.
Yes.
And the overriding problem is now we're seeing the results in the grammatical errors, like you say, in news stories and newspaper articles and so on and so forth. And it's only going to get worse as that sort of thing spreads to the so-called hard disciplines. My word, imagine in 50 years Boeing not having American engineers that can do, the fluid flow calculations for aerodynamics or things of this sort. It's just a nightmarish world that we're creating. And the only thing that's going to happen is the American people are going to become increasingly a third world labor force, and all the skilled jobs and positions are going to be done overseas.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing all of that happen right now. And the problem is it begins with education. If you keep throwing money at this defunct, dead, failing and failed system, it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. So if you want to read relatively error-free newspaper articles, then, I'd say the solution is to get back to the idea that we have to have real evaluations and not, computerized tests. And real evaluations, like it or not, mean you're going to have to require students to write, and you're going to have to require teachers and professors sitting down and actually going through a pile of papers, reading them and evaluating them one-on-one, hands-on-hand. There's no two ways about it. This rush for so-called scientific and objective evaluation is what has produced this mess.
Yeah.
Because what they were trying to do, or part of the excuse was that they were trying to get rid of subjective evaluations. Well, the problem is, even in a scientific evaluation, it's still subjective, only it's less so. It's merely you're being subjected to the group that demands that you select from a pre-selected set of answers, and it's still subjective. There's nothing scientific about it. There's nothing purely objective about it. And we've been sold this objective bill of goods. I mean, my word, GeorgeAnn, at the University of Oxford, at least, I'm speaking about a system that I knew 20 years ago. I've heard horror stories now from people telling me that they're corporatizing that beloved institution along the American model.
Dear. Oh.
Yeah, come on, folks, wake up over there in Europe. You don't need to follow this country and its failed educational system and policies and bureaucracies. That's the last thing you need to be doing. But, at least when I was there and for the centuries before, if you were an undergraduate, you did not, there are no class requirements, there's no attendance requirements, you can show up or not show up to any university lectures as you please. The only thing is at the end of your 3-year stint, they're going to give you a week-long comprehensive examination in your subject area, and all the questions on it are going to be essay.
Yes.
So in other words, it doesn't matter what your discipline is, if it's mathematics, if it's biology, if it's sociology, if it's, Chinese literature, it doesn't matter. You are going to get a comprehensive examination. And this is undergraduate level. This is for a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
You sit a week-long exam, 8 hours a day, answering questions. And writing. This is the key. Writing. And all of those questions are then going to be evaluated by the faculty of the university.
Yes.
And then the results are going to be published in the London Times. And and here's the thing, GeorgeAnn, there's no retakes. This is a one-shot deal. Now, that to me is a system that's, number one, treating you like an adult to begin with.
Yes.
You're responsible for what you do and what you achieve, and there's no one else to blame if you don't but you.
None of this namby-pamby.
None of this namby-pamby, tick off your name in a roll call book, and all of this nonsense that you even get in the American system at the postgraduate level.
Yes.
So in other words, this is why I say I just got sick of that system. This babysitting, dumbed down, clueless educational system that we have in this country. There is not a university over here. I don't care how big you are or where you've gone. There's not a university over here that I'd stack against that place. Not one. And I'm not trying to toot my horn. I'm just trying to say it's a different system and it's a different philosophy. And I'm not saying that we should be completely European either. But what I am saying is we've got to get rid of this failing system. It has and is failing.
Well, a big tip-off that it was going to fail and meant to fail was the saying, no child left behind.
Left behind, yes.
When you hear things like that,
yes,
you know it's intended to fail.
Yes, well, this is the whole idea, again, of democratized education. But the plain fact of the matter is that we have to get through our thick American heads is that not everybody in this country is meant to go to college and, come out with a 4.0 in quantum mechanics or genetics or what have you.
Yes.
There are some people that are much more gifted in working on airplane engines or elevators or farm implements or what have you.
Yes.
And they want to do this, but no, we've got to cram everybody into a 19th century model of mass production, and everybody has to move through the system, down the assembly line and move through the system in this cookie-cutter system. And we expect results from this, and it's not working, and it never has worked, and it never will work. So yeah, we got on education again, but I just think the system is overdue, not just for an overhaul, it's overdue to be scrapped. And if that means throwing a bunch of you people up in Princeton running bubble tests through your computers, so be it.
Yes. Yes. Even the testing is screwed up.
Yes.
I can't even put it into words, Joseph.
No, I can't either.
Yusuf Battle did a 30-minute talk on education and tests. And he's right there that a lot of this stuff needs to be gotten rid of.
Well, they're not tests. This is what my friend was trying to say. They're not tests of ability.
Right.
Because, let's just take English for one thing. Most of those tests do not require you to write, to actually put your thoughts into words and spell them correctly and come out in coherent sentences with a reasoned pattern of argument.
Right.
They don't test these things. So how can we expect anything else in this system to work? I mean, my word, the ability to communicate, whether in oral or written language, is the key to everything else.
Yes.
And, my word, when my friend is talking about high school students reading and testing at a second or third grade reading level.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, folks, this is an indictment. I don't care if you're a certified teacher pulling down $70,000 a year. You can defend this system all you want, but the fact of the matter is it's failing, and it's failing because if you don't wake up and realize that these two planks of certification, which basically creates a union of mediocrity,
yes,
and these standardized tests, it's an absurdity. Nothing is going to get better until that system is dismantled. And the only way, it's like I say, if I had children, GeorgeAnn, and were wealthy enough, I would not send them to not even a private American institution. I'd send them to Russia.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry to be so blunt, but when you have students over there that are several grades ahead of their counterparts in this country,
yes,
and they don't have classrooms full of computers and televisions and all the fancy gizmos that we have over here.
Yeah.
They don't require this nonsensical certification process that's been dreamt up by a bunch of doctors of education. I mean, talk about a silly pseudo-discipline. They don't have any of this nonsense, and they don't put up with this nonsense. And so it's no wonder that the engineers and mathematicians are coming out of Europe, they're coming out of Russia, they're coming out of India, they're coming out of China. But at least our students can feel good about themselves and toss a football.
That's true.
Sorry to get on my soapbox.
Oh, no, don't be sorry. Because what you're saying is right. It is valid.
Yeah.
I'm at a loss for words. It's
criminal, GeorgeAnn.
Yes, it is.
It's criminal.
And to take a young mind, here's something too. By 6th, 7th, 8th grade, you have a boy he wants to learn mechanical things.
Yes.
He doesn't want to be a damned rocket scientist. Why not put him in a program that educates him on those things?
It's frustrating,
yes.
And I can't even begin to tell you my frustrations, and listening to my friend, earlier today describe the business about coloring with crayons and then running around and play. This, GeorgeAnn, that may sound like an exaggeration, but I can assure you that when I was in a similar certification program that I had started to get my certification, to be able to teach in these failing public schools. I was subjected, as I mentioned in the previous, the session before the last one that we did with my friend, they had us bring a bunch of objects from our apartment, in to show everybody and tell a little bit about ourselves. So in other words, we were playing show and tell. So here's me. I'm bringing in my gargoyle collection and my my hatching dragon's eggs and all the Tesla coils and all this stuff from my apartment. People are thinking, dear Lord, this guy wants to teach.
Yeah.
But basically it amounted to a kindergarten show and tell session. And this is for adults. And this is engineering the perception that you are a cog in a machine. You're not supposed to think for yourself, and you're supposed to be a little juvenile.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm sorry, folks. This is producing a nation not only of dunces, it's producing a nation of children.
Yes.
I mean, look at Congress. And it's producing a nation of, me first and to hell with everybody else.
Treasonous SOBs.
Yes, it is a failed system in that respect because it hasn't even socialized people.
Yeah.
So there's nothing for it as far as I'm concerned other than to say that, if you want an education, don't get it in this country. I'm very serious. If you want a college education, go to Poland, go to Russia, go to China, don't do it here.
Yeah.
Because it is a failing system. It is not worth the thousands of dollars that they're charging you anymore to sit in classes and have professors socialize you and commit you to a particular political agenda, which is usually liberal.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it. It is just, if I had to do it all over again, GeorgeAnn, I have to tell you, I would not. I probably would not go to college, but if I did, I wouldn't spend any time doing it in this country. None. I don't care. If I had a free ride to Harvard, I'd say no.
Well, I can't blame you on that. Joseph, how do we fix this monster?
The first thing that we'd have to do is teachers themselves have to stand up and say, even though we're certified, this is nonsense. We need good teachers in the system, and the good ones aren't in the system because this certification process is a bunch of childishness.
Yeah.
Get rid of it. It should be totally based on your transcript and knowledge of a subject that you're required to teach. That's the first thing. And the second thing is we have to wake up and realize that the Educational Testing Services Corporation and all the other corporations out there that the government is paying money to, big money, to run these stupid tests through their computers and spit out a number, that this is not evaluation or assessment. Period.
That's
true. End of discussion.
That's true.
Put the evaluation back in the hands of the teachers actually doing the teaching. So, it's a two-track system. It's a vicious circle. But that would be my solution. There is no reason. And the other thing is we have to get rid of the teachers that aren't teaching.
Yes.
Period. That may sound cruel, but we just have to get rid of them. We have to get back to the idea that even if you work for the government, you can lose your job.
There's a list on WorldNet Daily of female predators.
Yes.
That were school teachers. Mm-hmm. And it is astounding the number of these female predators.
If you're required, but why should we expect anything less? If you're required to teach young adolescents how to put condoms on cucumbers, why should we expect anything less?
Yeah. Exactly.
But my philosophy is that belongs in the home with the parents.
Yes, absolutely.
Number one. And number two, you shouldn't even have the time, you should be so busy actually teaching subjects, teaching biology, teaching literature, teaching grammar, teaching music, teaching mathematics. You should be so busy during the day doing that you don't have time for this other Mickey Mouse you-know-what.
That's right. That's absolutely true. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's a horrible system, but it's an experiment that the results are in. We would think that after 100+ years since John Dewey and Wilhelm Wundt, you would think that the results are in, and we would have learned our lesson.
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is, I think there's a certain amount of arrogance, of cultural arrogance in this country that assumes that we cannot learn how radically wrong our system is and take the drastic, dramatic steps necessary to fix it.
I agree with you there. It's sort of a built-in thought that we can't be wrong.
Yes.
And by golly, we are wrong, not only in education, but in a lot of other things too.
Well, it's a cultural arrogance that is not serving us domestically. It's not serving us internationally.
Right.
I can't tell you, GeorgeAnn, and again, I'm going to recall anecdotal things about my past, but when I was in England reading for my degree at Oxford, I had the chance to observe a lot of other Americans there.
Yes.
At that institution that had come from Princeton, from Harvard, from Yale, from Johns Hopkins, the prestigious universities.
Yes.
And GeorgeAnn, I was genuinely embarrassed. I was embarrassed, number one, at I don't know how else to put it. I was embarrassed at the smarmy arrogance that these people displayed, thinking that they were really smart because they had gone to these institutions and come out of their respective institutions with their degrees and so on and so forth. GeorgeAnn, I can tell you almost to a man, these people, and I know some of them, I knew some of them back then in Oxford that are on TV right now.
Oh, dear.
Okay?
Yeah.
I knew some of them. I can think of one very, very famous Republican pollster that I knew and met at Oxford that is on TV a lot. All right?
Dear.
And what gets me, GeorgeAnn, is these people in their arrogance, they were quickly shown up for being empty windbags by their British counterpart. Not so much because the British were superior or anything, but they just were better educated. Mm-hmm. They knew their history. They knew their language. And they weren't arrogant about it. But it was an embarrassment to me, GeorgeAnn, to see the attitude of, number one, of the Americans that I observed there, and number two, the attitude was out of proportion to what they actually knew. So I don't know if that would be representative of my friend's experience over there, but all I can tell you is we really have to be humble enough in this country to look at our educational system and to call it for what it is. It's a fraud.
Absolutely. We have high school students that can't read a prescription bottle.
Yes, I know.
They can't find their own state on a map.
Yes, I know.
Let alone another country.
Yes.
It just boggles my mind.
Yes. Yeah. It does. And just think, in 20 years, the pharmacists won't be able to read the prescription bottles.
Yeah.
It's it's going to come to that pass unless we get a handle on it. That may sound alarmist, and people will say, "Oh, Dr. Farrell, you're surely exaggerating because the professional disciplines, law and medicine and so on, they'll never go for that. It'll never get to that state." Watch.
Oh my gosh! Well, just look at some of the attorneys that have been turned out. Oh, frightening.
GeorgeAnn, it's interesting you should say that because, again, I'm going to tell a little anecdote. I used to teach at the college level. I used to teach a course in medieval history. Okay, and in this course, it was, you know me, it was not a walk in the park.
Right. Yes.
It wasn't bring your picnic lunch and we'll all sit around and talk about the Crusades. It wasn't that sort of thing. But in the course, I did a lot of history of the development of law. All right, and in particular, the early, Norman French background and Anglo-Saxon background of English jurisprudence.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this, but in the course of dealing with the law and the development of jurisprudence, I had a very, very famous trial lawyer in Oklahoma in my class, and I didn't know this, but he was actually the fellow that tried the Telex versus what was it? Telex versus IT&T or something. It was a big case in Oklahoma back in the 80s. But he was the trial lawyer that had tried that case. Mm-hmm. And, I gave my 3 weeks' worth of legal presentation and the development of the petite jury and the grand jury and why those developed and, the various major decisions, crown cases that were benchmarks and did a little foray into the development of the various writs, in English law.
Well, maybe we can get into some of that. Sounds yummy.
Oh, my. Well, if we do, we're going to start out with a writ quo warranto, and I'll clue some people in on some fun things you can do with that one.
Okay.
Anyway, I had this trial lawyer, and after the 3 weeks of that part of the course were over, he pulled me aside and he says, "Dr. Farrell, can I talk with you?" And I said, "Sure." And he says, "Well, my name is such and such, and I don't know if you are familiar with the name, but I used to be a fairly well-known trial lawyer in these parts." And he proceeded to tell me his background, and I said, "Oh, you're the one."
Yeah.
Well, GeorgeAnn, he said, "I really wish I had you as a history of law professor in law."
Oh.
And I said, "Why is that?" And he says, "Because they don't teach any of this in law school." And I said, "Yeah, probably not. You know why?" And he says, "No." And I said, "Because they think that theology is an irrelevant degree."
Oh,
when in fact, if you have a degree in that kind of theology, you have to know so much.
Yes.
That overlaps with other disciplines and the beginnings of other disciplines in history, that it's a very interesting degree, actually. But my point here is it's something that I said before. If you want to know a discipline, know its history.
Yes.
Know its history. And this is the other thing that is so absolutely, totally lacking in the American system. Because I don't care what discipline you study, unless it's something like, English literature or the discipline of history itself, you don't get exposed, in most cases, to the history of that discipline, even in college, other than maybe an elective course, which is a very high overview survey course. Mm-hmm. But, if it were up to me and I were teaching physics in college, the students would be reading the actual historical papers in the order that they were presented in the history of the discipline.
Oh, yes.
They'd be reading Maxwell.
Yeah.
They'd be reading Faraday. They would be reading Albert Einstein. They would be reading Max Planck. They would be reading Werner Heisenberg and getting their noses out of a textbook.
Yes.
And that means it'd be a heck of a lot of reading, but they would know both the concepts and how they developed and why.
That's a big issue.
That is a very big issue.
Yes.
And it's true of every discipline that I can think of under the sun, and the way the American school system approaches them, even at the college level. And, you know, I took the same approach when I was teaching philosophy, that, you know, I got textbooks that had texts in them, you know.
Yeah.
And we proceeded chronologically, and we read the primary sources, and the students hated it at first because, my God, you know, you're expected to read and think.
Yes.
You know? But at the end of it, they're so far in advance of anything in a standard version of a presentation academically in any of those subjects. It's not even funny. And there are so few willing to buck the system and do things that way. And perish the thought you try and do it in the public school system.
Oh, they'd fire you in a minute.
Well, it's either that, or if you're a good teacher, then all the mediocrities gang up against you, you know, and say the same old song and dance. Oh, you're not a team player, and all of this happy nonsense that we've all
team playing.
Well, but this is my point. That's part of the social engineering, GeorgeAnn.
Yes.
That's part of the social engineering. Team player is nothing but a word for tyranny. Team player, in that context, is nothing but, in my opinion, a euphemism for someone who is willing and able to think for themselves, no matter what the group says.
Yeah.
You know, and this is the other big point and problem. The socialization in the American school system is designed to plug you into a group rather than to stimulate independent and creative thought. And that's why this country is also failing. I mean, my word, you're the one that mentioned Boeing has opened up a plant in Red China and closed down a plant over here and shipping a bunch of jobs over there. Okay?
Yeah.
Well, from Boeing's point of view, can you blame them? Number one, the American worker is for the most part, is now to the point that they're increasingly less competent than their foreign competitor, who is cheaper to pay.
Yeah. What Boeing did, they got a huge
contract,
contract, and it almost immediately fired
a
whole bunch of people.
I'm not saying it's not wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's very wrong to do that.
Yes.
You know, there's no reason that those good people should have lost their jobs just because the company wanted to fatten up its bottom line.
Yeah.
You know, this free trade nonsense. But on the other hand, when the skilled workforce is somewhere else and it's increasingly more skilled, that's my point. It's all coming back to education.
Yes.
I mean, my word, GeorgeAnn, look at the thousands of dollars you pay now for a college education.
Oh.
Even at a school that's not a big name.
Yeah.
Look at the thousands of dollars that you pay for it. And look at what you get out of it.
Well, look at these online
universities, yes.
Yeah. And what do they offer? How to design, how to be in criminal justice.
Yes.
Which means you can be a guard at a prison.
Yes.
Ridiculous stuff.
Yeah. Everything now, this is the other thing that has happened. This is part of the socialization. Education in this country has become the granting of a license to practice a particular job.
Well,
and it's no longer education in an academic discipline. This is the other big crime going on in this country. The creation of pseudo-disciplines and then the transformation or transmutation of an academic degree, which at one time meant that you could apply to a variety of jobs because you were capable of learning a variety of tasks and you were capable of independent thought and you are a responsible person. Okay? That's the way it used to be. Now, it's like you say, You have to have a degree in cosmetology. You have to have a degree in criminal justice. You have to have a degree in forensics. You know, it's become ridiculous because a degree costs you thousands of dollars. It's a license anymore, and the jobs that you're applying for with those degrees, the cost benefit ratio on education anymore in this country just isn't there.
That's right. And I'd like to add, anything that you need a license for, that license can be taken away.
That's right.
By the state.
That's right.
And anything, I don't care what it is, anything that you need a license for is illegal.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You know, I'm not going to get involved in legal philosophy. The real problem is it's this transformation of education into a vocational license.
Yeah.
And that's part again of the social engineering and perception management of what's going on.
Yes.
And you know, I'm of the definite old-fashioned philosophy. Education doesn't end when you're out of school. It begins.
Yeah.
School is simply something that is there to try and teach you how to think and how to handle information that is initially foreign to you. You know, that to me, and the final bottom line is school is there to pass on the tradition and deposit of human knowledge. That, to me, is what it's all about. In other words, it is an intensely human activity. The difference between that philosophy and the philosophy of the American system, where school exists to prepare you to take a bubble test, is profound.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's you know, one is very superficial, and the other one is a very deep, intensely human activity.
Yeah.
And you know, I call me a Luddite, call me an obscurantist. I'm as much dependent and in favor of the internet as everybody else. But there is a certain thing that cannot be transmitted on the internet that is a part of the high academic tradition, and that can only happen in human contact. And we're losing that, GeorgeAnn.
Yes.
We are losing that. And I guarantee you, every time a student is exposed to it to any degree, they love it. That's what they want. I can't tell you how many times I heard students after the end of my courses when I was teaching college courses, come up and tell me, "You are the first college professor I've ever had. You're the first real professor."
Yes.
And I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's rare.
They do.
They do
love to learn.
Yes, they do.
And when they realize, oh my God, I'm learning this.
GeorgeAnn, no one likes to be treated like they're stupid.
I know.
No one likes to be condescended to.
Yes.
And that is what this educational system does.
Yes, it does.
It condescends to you.
Yeah.
It condescends to you. It treats you, even at the PhD level, like you are in grade school.
Yeah.
How then do we expect to produce adults at an adult level of learning? Look at our leaders and what children they are.
Oh, yeah. I think at the highest levels, call them Illuminati, call them Masons, whatever. I think that it's kind of orchestrated with the aim of dumbing down, causing kids to hate school, all of that, Joseph.
I certainly wouldn't disagree that there is a certain percentage of it that is deliberate.
Yeah.
But having been in it and experienced it, it's, for the most part, I would say 95 to 98% of the people in education
Yes.
are oblivious
Oh, yeah.
to the stupidity of the system.
Well, because they can't see the forest for the trees.
They can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
And I think, it may have been deliberate at the start and so on, but now that system has been run for so long.
Yes.
It's like my friend said, it truly requires stepping completely outside of this system to realize how truly awful and broken it is.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I knew at one time in my life a Russian Orthodox priest, a young fellow, from Russia, whose children were all born in this country, but he refused. You know, this is a priest with, 3 little kids on a priest's salary, which is not, a whole lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But he refused to let them attend any American public educational school system ever.
He must have been Eastern Orthodox.
Yes, of course, he was Russian Orthodox.
Yeah.
But the problem is that he refused simply because, coming from Russia, he realized and recognized what this school system was over here. It was fraudulent, and those were his words.
Oh, well, he was certainly right.
Yeah, well, of course he was right. Of course he was right. And I told him, I told him, I said, Alex, eventually they're going to be of college age, and he says they'll go to Russia. And they probably did, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, if I had to do it all over again, I would not have done my first 2 collegiate degrees in this country at all, and I doubt I would have gone to college at all if I had to do it all over again. Because, GeorgeAnn, in college, I was bored.
Yeah.
Until I went over to England, I was bored.
Mm. Yeah, they go out of their way not to stretch the kids.
No, exactly.
Not to stretch their mind.
That's because most of the teachers and most of the professors don't know how to do it, because they themselves were not stretched.
Mm-hmm.
They themselves were not stretched. I can count on one hand all of my high school and college teachers and professors that I remember.
Yes.
The rest were such glaring, glittering mediocrities that I don't remember them. I remember only being insulted, condescended to, and bored in their classes.
Yeah. Oh, recalling my days in high school.
Yeah, well, who doesn't recall their days in high school?
Oh, my gosh.
Of endless boredom and maybe 1 or 2 bright shining stars of teachers that didn't really care about the dumbest student in the class. They were going to teach the smartest one.
Yeah.
And I hate to be so blunt. That sounds cold-blooded. That sounds like I don't care about all the students, but that's quite the opposite.
Yes.
Every human being, if challenged, will rise to the level that they are capable of rising to.
Yes. That's
and
true.
We are not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
No child left behind.
Yeah.
It's just like my friend said, well, if the smart ones are having to do more work to get the same grade, why should they? Why should they display the fact that they are a little more gifted in a particular subject than another student?
Oh.
And subject themselves then to the peer pressure and ridicule that produces. The system isn't working.
No.
It is not working. Every time I see the dummy crooks and Republicans in Congress say that they're going to fix education, I shudder.
Yeah. Yes. With good reason. All they do is throw more money at it.
Yeah, they make a failing system even worse.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is, until, and let's remember, many of these politicians are stockholders in these educational testing corporations and in these private prisons and all of the happy nonsense that has become part of this system.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not working. There's no sense in throwing more money at it. I'm sorry if I'm upsetting a lot of teachers out there, but I've had it.
I can tell. I can tell.
Well, you know, it's been 12 years since I've been in a college classroom, GeorgeAnn, and I remember the nightmare. Like I say, I used to give an initial test the first day of class just to find out where they were at, and I remember the nightmare of sitting in my apartment that night, barely being able to survive.
Yes.
With the pittance of money that I was getting, and then half the time the state of Oklahoma wouldn't even pay me on time.
Oh.
You know, this is the other part of it. At the college level now, you're lucky anymore if you get tenure. They're doing everything on the basis of adjunct instructors who are part-time.
Oh.
And in many states, that means you literally have to teach the whole semester before you get paid.
Wow.
Yeah, it is that bad. It is that bad. And who are the ones pulling down the $70,000 and $80,000 a year jobs in those institutions? They're the administrators.
That don't really do anything.
That don't do anything. They're the doctors of education that write big, funny, fancy articles about educational theory and pedagogy.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just horrid.
Yeah.
GeorgeAnn, if I were in charge, I'd wave my magic wand, and everybody with the initials EDD after their name would be out of work. And I'm sorry if that upsets people, but you people are the problem.
Well,
go get a degree in a real subject like math, like physics, like philosophy, like literature. Get a PhD in a real subject, then I'll call you doctor.
Yes, yes.
But
yes.
don't tell me you have a doctorate in education.
Yeah.
This is the problem. Education is not a subject.
That's right.
It is a process,
yeah.
and it is more importantly, it is a tradition. It is a tradition.
Wow, Joseph. It's just so screwed up and so
yes.
Ingrained. You know, you were talking about the coloring thing and the marching
yes.
around the room. And
well, that was my friend Scott was talking about the coloring thing.
Yeah.
I was talking about show and tell.
That reminds me, I went to a creative seminar
mm-hmm.
at Minninger's,
mm-hmm.
and that was part of it.
Oh, yeah.
They wanted you to take the color crayons and color this thing and then march around to music and stuff. Absolutely insane.
Well, when I quit that certification program I was in, as I mentioned, I pulled one of the professors aside and said that, you know, this method of citation is just not going to fly.
Yeah.
You know, and number two, I pulled another professor aside, you know, one of those that had been responsible for the show and tell episode all day, you know, that we're sitting around showing people our personal effects, and that, you know me. I wasn't going to let that opportunity to go by.
Yeah.
Without bringing the most bizarre things I could possibly bring. You know, so I brought my gargoyle collection. You know, but anyway, but I told him. I said this was the most inane, childish kindergarten exercise. It was a total waste of time. It was a total waste of money. And I said, you ought to be ashamed of yourself for perpetrating this nonsense and getting a salary for it and making this a requirement for people to stand up and teach history or mathematics or biology or what have you in high school.
Yeah.
It's you know, GeorgeAnn, what the American system is saying, let's be very blunt here.
Okay.
The American system is saying that James Clerk Maxwell, that Arthur Eddington, that Albert Einstein, that Werner Heisenberg would have to get a certification to teach science in high school in this country.
Oh, my God.
That's what it is saying. That is arrogance. It is saying that William Shakespeare, that Oscar Wilde, that André Gide, or Marcel Proust, or you name any author you want to name, would have to get a certificate to teach English.
Oh, my God.
That's what the American system is saying, and that is arrogance.
Oh, yeah.
Pure and simple. No two ways about it.
Huge arrogance.
It is huge arrogance. It is saying that Charles Darwin would have to get a certificate to teach biology.
Yeah.
And on we would go. And it's inane. It's nonsense.
Yes, it is.
It is an absolute shibboleth of fraud.
Yeah.
Nothing more and nothing less.
Absolutely, Joseph. I am in 100% agreement with you and your friend about the system. It sucks.
Yeah, there's no other two ways about it. It does. It just plain sucks.
Yeah.
The arrogance of the system and the mediocrities in charge of it. Can you imagine Johann Sebastian Bach or Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart or Frédéric Chopin having to get a teaching certificate to teach music in the public school?
Yeah, they'd make them do it.
And they'd make them do it. And by golly, I can just see the response of those guys. You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
No way. And so what that means, GeorgeAnn, is that the people who are most qualified to teach in the subjects are the ones that are not going to get the teaching certificates because that field has been abandoned to the mediocrities.
Yeah.
That's what it means.
Wow.
The expression used to be that if you want to learn a subject, teach.
Yes.
But now the expression is, if you can't do it, teach.
Yeah. Oh.
It is an absurd system.
Yes, it is. And with no qualms anywhere about that, it is an absurd system, and it is producing nothing but mediocrity.
When I hear teachers or education lobbyists say that we have to make our certification requirements more stringent,
oh dear,
I want to scream.
Mm-hmm.
Because these people are frauds.
Yes, they are.
They're the ones that are saying that the geniuses that have produced the human achievements and advancements over the centuries would have to get a certificate from them.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me, listening to any of these people, that they have accomplished or achieved anything
right
in any of those disciplines or fields of human endeavor.
Well, they just like to go around being puffed up.
Yes, that's exactly so.
Yeah.
That's exactly so.
Oh, Joseph. Well, I don't see it changing, at least not for a while.
No, it's not going to change, GeorgeAnn. It won't change until it absolutely has to. It won't change until everything that feeds into it and feeds off of it has collapsed.
Yeah.
And we're watching the collapse.
Yes, we are.
We are watching the collapse. I can pick up right now and go to Japan and teach English, and they're not going to require me to have a certificate. Because, the essential thing there is it's the content.
Yes.
I do not and it's the same thing, the only reason after 35 years I still can carry on a smattering of a conversation in German is that my German teachers in high school, who thank goodness were all Germans, threw the American Educational Pedagogy and Methods textbook right out the window and said, when you're in this classroom, the only language you're going to hear is German.
Good for them.
And, it was.
Well, Joseph, I don't know what it'll take to fix this. If it can be fixed, if they're even willing to fix it.
The only thing, GeorgeAnn, that's going to fix it is if enough teachers themselves who are subjected to this horrendous system, the ones actually holding the certificates and the credentials, rise up en masse and say, enough is enough, we're throwing all of this out.
Yes.
It's got to come from within the profession itself.
Yeah, that's true.
And if you continue to perpetuate the system, then it's not going to get fixed. It's just simply not going to get fixed.
Yeah.
And the saddest thing, GeorgeAnn, is now they are trying to get college professors to get certification to teach.
Oh.
I'm serious. So in other words, universities and colleges will be subjected to the same slimy dumbing down process that we've seen at work in the rest of the system.
Oh.
And that, to me, is a sure sign that, you want the whole country to fail, that's it.
Yep.
Just let these doctors of education require professors to get a certification to be a professor in their discipline.
Oh, gee.
It's like I say, that would mean Albert Einstein, Werner Heisenberg, Johann Sebastian Bach, William Shakespeare. You pick a discipline and pick somebody that you know in it. They'd all have to get certification from these arrogant you-know-whats.
Puffed up.
No, I was about to use a much more colorful and descriptive.
Well, go ahead.
term.
Go ahead.
No, I'm not going to do that. But it's just insane. It's just insane.
Well, you get no argument from me. Everybody, go to GizaDeathStar.com. Joseph has a PayPal button there. Please make use of it.
Oh, yeah.
He's struggling with big projects and the need for research material that is not available on the Internet. And we've got to keep Joseph going. So please go to GizaDeathStar.com. You can also go to the Byte Show, to the audio library, click on Joseph Farrell's name and his special page with all of the audio files that we have worked on are all there. And the Byte Show would appreciate some donations.
Absolutely. Help GeorgeAnn out too, folks, because we've got to keep independent voices like this on the air too. I thank you, GeorgeAnn, for making that announcement. And I do, again, I wish I could thank each and everybody by name. I really do. There are a couple of people in particular. There's one dear lady that I can't thank you enough, and everybody, not only for the donations but also for the comments, because it's the feedback too that lets me know if I'm saying things the right way or lets me know what's on people's minds and hearts. That's not to say that I tailor what I write to the prevailing winds, but
right.
but I do appreciate the interaction.